The Georgia wind blew across the field, but it did not carry the pure scent of cotton ready for harvest. It carried a pungent, bitter reek of industrial chemicals, a scent of death closing in. I stood frozen in the middle of the rows of cotton that should have been a white sea as pure as the clouds. But before my eyes now was only a botanical graveyard. The cotton branches were withered, blackened, and shriveled under the southern sun. Each cotton fiber, before it could even bloom, had been dyed a murky gray, rotting and reeking of chemicals. My chest tightened, every breath bringing a sharp pain, as if thousands of needles were stabbing into my lungs. 6 long months of waking up early and staying up late, meticulously tending to every green sprout, now vanished into a pile of expensive ruins. This was not just a failed harvest. This was a crime against the land.
"Look at what you've done to our legacy, Jack!" The shout of Thomas, my brother-in-law, rang out, tearing through the deathly silence of the field. He stood there, in polished leather boots without a single spot of mud, pointing at me with an obvious triumph behind his angry face. My in-laws, Mr. and Mrs. Beaufort, stepped forward with faces distorted by shock and rage. "We trusted you with the management of this entire ranch, Mr."
Beaufort said, his voice trembling as if about to shatter. "And yet you mixed the pesticide ratios wrong. Do you want to destroy this lineage?" I looked at Thomas and saw him smirk slightly, a poisonous smile flashing by very quickly. He was the one who had secretly changed the labels in the chemical warehouse. He was the one who had signed the work log while I was away. I wanted to speak up, to point out the truth, but my wife's silence, standing behind them, was the most fatal blow. She looked at me with disappointed eyes, a coldness that I was already all too familiar with in this house. "Jack, just leave," Mrs. Beaufort said, dabbing a handkerchief to her eyes like a professional actress. "You are no longer a part of this family. We cannot keep a destroyer under our roof."
I did not defend myself or plead, because I knew every word at this moment was meaningless against the script they had orchestrated. I turned and walked away, my feet heavy as they stepped on the cracked, poisoned soil. They thought they had gotten rid of a useless laborer and shifted all the blame onto my head. But they didn't know that in my jacket pocket I was holding evidence that would make them pay with their entire livelihood. The field was dead, but the truth never disappears.
3 years ago, when I stepped into the Beaufort house, I brought with me all the enthusiasm of a young master's graduate in agriculture. I had loved their daughter with a pure love, without any calculation regarding the vast cotton fields or their long-standing reputation. But very quickly, I realized that in their eyes, I was just an upgrade for the ranch's labor force. Every achievement, every improvement in productivity I brought was credited to family tradition. Meanwhile, Thomas, a lazy man who only spent time taking virtual photos on expensive tractors, was always the one cheered. My in-laws treated him like a saint, even though he couldn't distinguish between a pest and a lack of water.
Whenever Thomas caused trouble, from gambling debts to equipment breakdowns, I was always the one who had to step in and clear the battlefield. "Family is family, Jack," Mr. Beaufort would often pat my shoulder and say that whenever he wanted me to work overtime without pay. That manipulation was as sweet as honey, but filled with the venom of injustice.
I had endured in silence, had dedicated myself because I believed that one day they would see my true value. But this year's cotton harvest changed everything. 2 weeks ago, I warned Thomas about the new, highly active pesticide he had just imported based on a smuggler's recommendation. "Thomas, this type hasn't been tested. It will kill the entire soil ecosystem if used in the wrong dosage," I told him in the warehouse.
He looked at me with contemptuous eyes, the look of a master for a servant who dared to lecture him. "You're just a guy with credentials on paper, while I'm the one with Beaufort blood in my veins." He spat on the floor. "Just do exactly what I wrote in the coordination order, or get out of here." To assert his power, he put pen to paper and signed the work log, confirming the use of that chemical despite all my warnings. I had seen the danger, had anticipated this disaster from the night he secretly mixed the medicine in a drunken stupor. While everyone was fast asleep, I quietly entered the field, took soil samples from many different locations, and put them into sealed test tubes. I also took photos of every page of the work log with Thomas's signature, confirming the use of that banned chemical. I did that not out of malice, but to defend myself against the toxicity of a family always ready to turn me into a scapegoat. Standing in the small room at the edge of the ranch, watching my few personal belongings being thrown out the door, I felt an immense relief. The long-standing bond had been severed by their own hands through deceit and selfishness.
"Don't ever come back here, you ragged gardener," Thomas shouted from the main house balcony. I picked up my bag, stepped into my old car without a single look back at that luxurious mansion. The cage was open, and the monster of manipulation would now have to face the ruins of its own creation. The cotton field had died at their hands, but my future had only just begun to sprout. I drove my old car away from the Beaufort Ranch gates, feeling the smell of chemicals still haunting my collar. In the car's glove compartment, the work log with Thomas's scrawled signature lay silent, like a sentence waiting for its day. Beside it were 3 test tubes filled with dark, poisoned soil, living proof of the destruction they had caused. I felt no regret taking them, because as Adeline once said, justice sometimes needs to be prepared in the dark. I stopped at the gates of the Sterling farm, the direct rival to the Beauforts for decades. This place was drier, the soil exhausted from lack of investment, but it gave me the feeling of a clean start. Mr.
Sterling, the farm owner,
looked at me with a skeptical but respectful gaze reserved for someone just cast out by the Beaufort dynasty. "I don't need a gardener. I need a miracle to save these seeds," he said, his voice hoarse from sun and wind. I looked down at the sandy soil beneath my feet, feeling the heat rising, dry, but still with a bit of potential life.
"I don't bring miracles. I bring truth and technique," I replied, feeling confidence begin to flow back into my veins. I began the work by cleaning my own soul before cleaning the land. Every night I sat under the dim oil lamp, studying geological charts and the microbial recovery formulas I had long nurtured. The smell of organic fertilizer and probiotics gradually replaced the bitter chemical smell in my memory. I hand-tilled every row of soil, feeling the roughness of the rocks gradually become softer and moister under meticulous care. Every time sweat fell to the ground, I remembered Thomas's smirk and the cold eyes of my in-laws. Their betrayal was like a high-powered fertilizer, pushing me to rise faster than ever before. Meanwhile, across the fence, the Beaufort ranch began to sink into a silent crisis. Thomas, in blind arrogance, tried to cover up the dead field by dumping tons of powerful chemical fertilizers. He wanted to create a fake green appearance to deceive investors and authorities. From the high hill, I could see thick drapes of chemical mist covering their fields every early morning. That was not life. That was a mummy decorated with poison.
My feeling at this moment was like Pamela's when she sat watching Sutton drink her own poison. The harvest at the Sterling farm began to sprout, to everyone's astonishment. The first cotton sprouts rose, dark green and sturdy, without any signs of withering or pests. I applied precision drip irrigation and used natural predators to protect the crops.
The sound of water trickling in the pipes sounded as sweet as a symphony amidst the scorching Georgia heat. Rumors of the genius engineer at the Sterling farm began to spread throughout the Charleston area. And of course, it soon reached the ears of the Beaufort family. One afternoon, as I was checking the soil moisture, Mr. Beaufort's shiny Mercedes stopped by the side of the road.
Thomas stepped out, his face aggressive and his eyes red with anger mixed with envy. "You stole the Beaufort family's farming secrets to bring them here, didn't you, traitor?" he shouted across the fence. I didn't look up, my hands still meticulously measuring chemical indicators in the soil. My silence seemed to drive him even crazier, much like how Pamela's composure defeated Sutton.
"Your fields are rotting from the inside, Thomas," I said, my voice calm but heavy with weight. "Don't blame me for your own stupidity when you held that pesticide bottle that night." Thomas froze, fear flashing in his eyes before he could cover it with a string of curses. They began to feel the heat from the agricultural inspection agencies preparing to intervene.
The water samples downstream began to show signs of heavy pollution, and they needed a scapegoat to protect that long-standing reputation. I knew they were secretly drafting a legal complaint, shifting all environmental pollution responsibility onto my head. They wanted to turn me into the criminal who had intentionally sabotaged the ranch before leaving.
But every night I opened the log with Thomas's signature and smiled to myself in the dark. Every page was undeniable proof, recording every day he ordered the use of banned chemicals. I also frequently met with Adeline, the trusted lawyer friend, to perfect the counterattack file. "They are digging their own graves, Jack," Adeline said after reviewing the control soil samples I had collected.
Their attempt to blame you is just one final blow that makes them fall deeper into the abyss. The yield at the Sterling farm was expected to double, a number unprecedented in this region's history. The pure white of the cotton began to appear, brilliant and proud under the sun. In contrast, the Beaufort fields now looked pathetic, with charred patches of soil and a stench rising from the rotting roots.
My mother-in-law began to call. Messages full of tearful manipulation about family affection began to arrive in torrents. "Jack, you must come back and help us explain to the inspectors. Family always needs each other," she wrote. I looked at the phone screen, seeing the image of her once throwing my belongings into the street without mercy. Family affection for them was just a card to use when they were about to lose everything. I didn't answer, just quietly blocked her number, one by one, just as Pamela had cut the toxic threads. The tension escalated to a peak when the federal inspection team officially sent a notice of a surprise audit. Thomas began to lose his mind. He tried to break into the Sterling Farms warehouse to sabotage, but was prevented by the security system I had established. This battle was no longer about the harvest. It was about who would be the one standing after all when the truth was revealed. I stood in my field of snow-white cotton, feeling the soft fiber under my fingers. This white was not the hollow purity of the Beauforts. It was a testament to the sweat, intellect, and steadfastness of a discarded man. The harvest of revenge had ripened, and I was ready to hand them the sentence they deserved. The cage was open, and the monster was about to face the mirror, reflecting itself. The Georgia sky today had not a single cloud, a brilliant blue, and as cruel as a mirror, reflecting every truth beneath the ground. The sweltering heat rose from the dead cotton rows, carrying the pungent smell of chemicals still haunting the air. I stood at the boundary between the two farms, watching 3 white cars with Environmental Protection Agency and Agricultural Inspector decals pull in to the Beaufort yard. The car engines cut out, leaving a terrifying silence. Only the sound of cicadas buzzing like death knells. Mr. Beaufort stepped out from the porch, his aged face trying to maintain composure, but his trembling clasped hands betrayed him. Thomas stood behind his father, sweat pouring down his forehead, even though he was standing in the shade. "Jack, get over here right now!" Mr. Beaufort's shout rang out, hoarse and full of coercion.
I slowly walked over, each step on the cracked earth sounding firm and decisive. In my bag, the work log and the test tubes containing soil samples seemed to radiate a strange heat. My wife, Emily, stood in the corner of the yard, her eyes swollen from crying, looking at me with a plea mixed with fear. "Inspectors, this is Jack, the person directly managing our fields throughout this past harvest,"
Beaufort said, his voice trying to regain a fake confidence. Every decision regarding chemical use and farming procedures was handled solely by him. Thomas stepped forward, his voice high-pitched and full of accusation. Exactly, he was the one who mixed the pesticide ratios wrong despite my warnings. He wanted to destroy this family because of personal conflicts. We intended to sue him in civil court for property damage.
I looked straight into Thomas's eyes, feeling the cowardice trembling behind his aggressive facade. The smell of lies at this moment was more pungent than the chemicals in the field. The lead inspector, a man with sharp eyes, looked at me, then at the pile of black, dead cotton plants behind them. "Mr. Jack, do you have anything to say about this allegation?" the inspector asked, his pen ready to record the death sentence for my career.
I took out a mask, calmly put it on, then pulled the first test tube from my bag. I am not in the habit of arguing with words when the land has already spoken for itself, sir, I replied, my voice sounding firm behind the mask. This is a soil sample I took from the Beaufort field the night before I was kicked out. It contains a paraquat concentration 10 times the allowed limit, a chemical that has long been banned from agricultural use.
Mr. Beaufort's complexion turned from pale to ash gray. Thomas moved to snatch the test tube, but the accompanying officer quickly stopped him. "Don't be so hasty, Thomas," I said, my smile hidden behind the mask, but my eyes full of mockery. I pulled out the work log, opening it to the exact page with his signature. And this is the chemical coordination log, signed by Thomas Beaufort himself that night.
He personally checked out this banned chemical and forced the workers to spray it on the fields when I was away. I recorded that dialogue where he declared that Beaufort blood was the one in command, not a guy with credentials like me. I pressed play on my phone. Thomas's overbearing and drunken voice rang out clearly amidst the silence. "I'm the boss. What chemicals I use is my right. You're just a hired hand." The recording ended, leaving a silence even more terrifying than the roar of a storm. Thomas collapsed in the yard, his face distorted with extreme panic, just as Sutton had collapsed amidst the ruins of the wedding cake. "No, Dad, I just wanted the crop to look greener. I didn't know it would destroy like this," he muttered in vain. Mr. Beaufort looked at his son, then at me, the pride of a long-standing farm owner, completely collapsed. Emily covered her face and sobbed, the cry of late regret. The lead inspector took the log, his gaze on Thomas,
full of contempt. This is not just a technical violation. This is a crime of environmental destruction and record fraud, the inspector declared coldly.
The Beaufort Ranch will be cordoned off immediately. You will face millions of dollars in fines and a permanent farming ban on this land. Mrs. Beaufort fainted right on the porch, her monogrammed handkerchief falling into the dirt. They had intended to use me as a scapegoat to cover up their own stupidity, but they didn't realize that I had turned those very mistakes into a noose tightening around their necks.
My feeling at this moment was not one of petty satisfaction, but of absolute peace as justice was served. I looked back at the dead field, once my sweat and tears, now only evidence of an ending. They had kicked me out empty-handed, but they were the ones who lost everything. I turned and walked away, not bothering to look back at the people wailing in the ruins of their lies.
Across the fence, the Sterling farm was still green, and I knew the true harvest of my life was just beginning to sprout. The cage was open, and the monster of manipulation had been destroyed by its own venom. 6 months later, I stood on the high podium of the county's public asset auction. The morning sun shone brightly on the wooden benches where the Beaufort family sat in the furthest corner, looking as pathetic as ghosts of themselves. The Beaufort Ranch, a pride spanning 3 centuries, was now just a massive debt on the bank scales. The smell of new paper and ink replaced the toxic chemical smell that once haunted my lungs. When the auctioneer's gavel fell for the last time, I officially became the owner of that pure white strip of land. I stepped down from the podium, walking past Thomas, who was now wearing cheap clothes and had a face haggard from suspended sentences. He looked at me with eyes full of hatred, but no longer had the courage to utter a single insult. Mr. Beaufort nodded slightly to me, a nod of surrender to a man he once considered a hired hand. I saw my wife, now ex-wife, standing quietly by the porch, her eyes carrying a deep sadness of loss. "Jack, what do you plan to do with that field?" she asked, her voice as fragile as a cotton fiber in the wind. "I will plant the truth on the ashes of lies," I replied, without a single flicker in my heart. I stepped into my car, feeling true freedom flowing in my veins, pure and powerful. My phone vibrated. A message from Mrs. Beaufort appeared. "Jack, please think of old times. Let us stay in the mansion. Family is family." I read it, feeling a bitter irony for those 2 words, family, they once used to chain me. I did not answer. I hit the block command on her number, then Thomas's, and finally Emily's. One by one, I cut the venomous threads that had bound me to that dark past.
The car rolled away, leaving behind the withering Beaufort mansion and the people
who did not know how to appreciate loyalty. My fields now began to sprout clean seeds under a sky no longer shaded by manipulation. The monster was gone, the cage was open, and I was finally, completely, truly free.